Theodore Roosevelt The Adventurous President by the editors of Time for Kids with Lisa DeMauro. Theodore Roosevelt stood still for this photo. It was taken in 1900. Chapter 1 Teddy Takes the Lead. It was early winter and the evening was chilly. The President of the United States wanted to take a walk. He left the White House with a few friends. The President was in the lead. The other men hurried to keep up. They chatted and joked. When the President laughed, his whole body shook. He threw back his head and flashed a mouthful of white teeth. The group stayed on a straight path. They never turned left or right. They climbed hills and pushed through bushes. Was there a puddle in the way? They splashed right through it. Straight on they went. Then they stopped at the wooded banks of the Potomac River. When you play, play hard. When you work, don't play at all. Theodore Roosevelt. Would the president turn back? No way. He began to undress. So did the others. They piled their clothes on the riverbank. Then, one by one, they jumped into the water and swam for the other side. This may have been a strange way to act, but not for Theodore Roosevelt. He was the 26th President of the United States, and almost everything about him was unusual. President Roosevelt, or Teddy, was full of energy. He didn't just hike, he boxed, wrestled, played tennis, and rode horses. Teddy liked to keep busy, and he liked to get things done. Once he set a goal, he wouldn't let anything stand in his way. That's why he liked his point-to-point walks. He set out from one point and went straight to another point. He didn't let anything force him off his path, not even the Potomac River. Good timing. Teddy became president in 1901. He was the perfect man for the job, a new kind of president for a new century. He wanted to push the country in a different direction. Teddy chopped down trees and cleared land for exercise. Times were changing. The U.S. continued to grow. Settlers kept moving farther west. The country's leaders worried about problems inside the U.S. The nation stayed out of world events. Teddy wanted the U.S. to be a world leader. He wanted it to set big, important goals. Then he wanted the country to march toward its goals no matter what. He saw the future of the country as if it were a giant point-to-point hike, and he was the man to lead. How did Teddy get to be the way he was? Why did he make the choices he made? To find the answers, you have to go back to the time when Teddy was just beginning his life. Heading west. As the U.S. grew, many people loaded up wagons and headed west. In 1800, there were 16 states. By 1900, there were 45. Chapter 2 Teddy's Busy Boyhood. When Teddy was a little boy, his nickname was Teedy. Later on, people would call him Teddy, but he never liked that name. Teedy lived in New York City. The Roosevelt family had lived there for hundreds of years. Teedy's father was Theodore Roosevelt Sr. He had strong ideas about how people should act. He believed that everyone should work hard. He also believed he had a duty to help others, including those less fortunate. Teedy's mother, Martha, was from Georgia. She was known for her great beauty and her gentleness. Teedy's father, Theodore. She loved art and music. People called her by her nickname, Mitty. Teedy was born on October 27, 1858. When he was 2, a terrible war started in the U.S., the Civil War. It was a war fought mostly between the northern and southern parts of the U.S. Mitty was a Southerner. Her brothers fought in the war on the side of the South. Teddy Sr. was a Northerner. He believed in the cause of the North. What should he do? He knew it would hurt Mitty if he fought against the South, so Teddy Sr. did not go to war. Instead, he paid another man to fight in his place, and he did work for the Northern Army that didn't involve fighting. When he was 4 years old, Teddy posed for this photo. Check out his clothes. Teddy's mother, Martha. Teddy felt bad that his father stayed out of the war. He thought fighting was a duty. Years later, in another war, Teddy would jump at the chance to fight, but first he had to grow up. A sickly kid. Teddy had 2 sisters, Anna and Corinne. He also had a younger brother, Elliot. All of the Roosevelt children had health problems. Teddy's were the worst. He had bad stomach and head pains. He also had asthma. People with asthma have trouble getting enough oxygen into their lungs. Nowadays, there are many medicines for people with asthma. But when Teddy was little, doctors couldn't do much to help. Nights were especially hard for the young boy. When Teddy couldn't breathe, Teddy Sr. would take him for a fast carriage ride. Teddy was a sickly child. This photo was taken when he was 11. The Roosevelts had this picture taken when they visited Egypt in 1872. Teddy is the second child from the right. His father would hold him tight as the horses galloped through the dark, empty streets. These rides seemed to help his lungs fill with fresh air. When Teddy was too sick to play, he sat and looked at books. Before he learned to read, he studied pictures. He loved looking at animals best. When he wasn't sick, Teddy was full of energy. It was hard for him to sit still. During trips to the country, he spent all days outdoors. He rode horses, swam, and climbed trees. He was always moving. Animals everywhere. Even in the city, Teddy spent most of his time outside. Often he searched for unusual bugs and animals. He was very interested in studying them. The house was filled with his creatures. He kept snakes in the water pitchers. He kept a snapping turtle in the washroom. Once he tipped his hat to a family friend on a streetcar. Out hopped two frogs. Imagine his friend's surprise. Teddy was interested in everything about animals. He cut apart dead animals to study their bones. He wanted to know what they ate and how long they lived. Teddy's Home Museum. Teddy set up a natural history museum at home. Wherever he went, he collected small animals such as frogs and turtles. He even learned how to use chemicals to preserve them. The chemicals smelled horrible. So did the dead animals. On family vacations, Teddy's brother Elliot begged to have separate bathrooms. He didn't want to share a sink or bathtub with Teddy's creatures. He drew pictures of birds and insects and described everything he saw. He wanted to be a naturalist, someone who studies plants and animals. As the years passed, Teddy's health did not improve. He was still weak and sick. When he was 12, his father took him aside. "Theodore," he said, "you must make your body. It is hard, dull work to make one's body, but I know you will do it." The young boy took the challenge. "I'll make my body," he said. So his father built him a gym. Teddy exercised for several hours every day. He wanted to build up his chest and his arms. The hard work paid off. When he was ready for college, Teddy was strong and healthy. Teddy's sideburns were growing into a beard when he was 17. Chapter 3. Teddy Enters Politics. Teddy entered Harvard University in 1876. He was a bundle of energy. He worked and played hard. He talked all the time, and he loved books. He could read very fast, and he had an amazing memory. Years later, he could repeat things he'd read, word for word. Teddy planned to be a scientist, but two things happened that would change his life forever. During Teddy's second year at school, his father died suddenly. It was a shock. Teddy's friends and family worried about him. They were afraid he would never get over his sadness. But Teddy was a man of action. He worked harder than ever to help take his mind off his troubles. Early in his third year at Harvard, joy came back into his life. He fell in love with a young woman named Alice Lee. Teddy and Alice planned to get married. Alice made it clear that she did not want Teddy to become a scientist. She didn't like the idea of cutting up animals or the smell of the chemicals he used. Teddy wanted to please Alice. He also wanted to honor his father. He could do that by working to make the world a better place. And if he were famous, that would bring honor to the family name. Ready to run. Teddy ran track in college. Here he is in his running gear. He knew what he should do with his life. Instead of science, he would go into politics. Teddy the Lawmaker. By November 1881, Teddy was a married man. He was also an elected official. Teddy ran as a Republican candidate for the New York State Assembly, the lawmaking body of the state. Teddy was different from most of the others in the assembly. He stood out for several reasons. There was the way he looked. Teddy had his hair parted down the middle. He wore an eyeglass that clipped to his nose and hung from a chain. He liked fancy clothes. Teddy's background was different too. His family was wealthy. He had traveled around the U.S. and even to Egypt. And he had a university education. Most people in politics at that time did not come from rich families. They did not have college degrees. So Teddy seemed out of place in the state government. The other lawmakers soon found out that Teddy was a hard worker. He worked to pass laws about who should get government jobs. Usually politicians would give jobs to people who helped them get elected. Teddy graduated from Harvard University, where he studied science. Teddy believed people should work in government only if they were good at their jobs. The public liked Teddy. When he ran for office again in 1883, he got most of the votes. Everything was going well for the young lawmaker. Then, in early 1884, tragedy struck. Teddy, standing on the right, was proud of this photo taken with other lawmakers. He thought people should get government jobs based on their brains and not who they knew. Alice Roosevelt is seated next to Teddy. The woman on the right is Alice's cousin. Teddy and Alice had been expecting a baby. On February 12th, Alice Roosevelt had a little girl. The baby was named Alice after her mother. Teddy and his wife were thrilled. The baby was healthy, but Teddy's wife became ill. At the same time, Teddy's mother, Mittie, was also very sick. On February 14th, Mittie died. A few hours later, in the same house, Teddy's wife died too. On the same terrible day, Teddy lost his mother and his wife. Teddy felt his world had ended. He did not know what to do. He turned to his sister Anna and asked her to take care of the new baby. Anna thought Teddy should build a home for his daughter. Teddy owned a piece of land in New York on Long Island. He decided to build a large house there. He called his new home Sagamore Hill. Sagamore was the name of a Native American chief. The chief had used the hill as a meeting place in the 1600s. Teddy finished his term in the New York State Assembly. Then he had to get away. He headed west, leaving Alice at home with Anna. Teddy had always loved the outdoors. Being active and busy in the outdoors would help the young widower forget his deep sadness. Sycamore Hill is in Oyster Bay, New York. Teddy loved the house and spent much time there. Teddy proudly poses in his Western gear. He even took off his glasses for the photo. Chapter 4, Cowboy on the Range. Teddy moved to what is now North Dakota. The local people thought he was a pretty odd character. He talked like an Easterner. He seemed too small for the rugged Western life, and sometimes he wore glasses. That was very unusual for a cowboy. Everyone thought Teddy would find life too hard out west. But people would soon change their minds. Teddy rode out on the trail with a guide to hunt buffalo. The weather was cold and rainy. They couldn't find any buffalo, but Teddy never complained. In fact, he was having a wonderful time. It took 2 weeks for Teddy to find a buffalo. After he shot it, he did a little dance around it. He sent the animal's head back east. He wanted to have it stuffed to hang on his wall. A conservationist is born. Teddy loved being in the wild country. No matter how tired, wet, or hungry he got, he stayed in a good mood. Teddy loved nature. He thought it was beautiful and amazing. He studied every new plant or animal to see what he could learn. Teddy said, "A hunter should be a lover of nature as well as of sport, or he will miss half of the pleasure of being in the woods." He realized that nature must be protected or it will disappear. People will tear it down or spoil it. People who try to protect nature are conservationists. One day, Teddy will become the greatest conservationist president in history. Teddy lived in the West for 2 years. When he headed back east, he was a changed man. He was tough and healthy. He would go back to politics, but his life in the West would always be part of him. Teddy went home to Sagamore Hill. Now he could get to know his little daughter, Alice. He would also get to know an old friend again. Her name was Edith Caro. Edith and Teddy had known each other as children. They met again after the death of Teddy's wife. Teddy and Edith got married at the end of 1886. Mystery Place. Clue number 1. You can find this mountain in Keystone, South Dakota. Clue number 2. The 4 U.S. presidents carved into the mountain represent the first 150 years of U.S. history. They are George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Each face is 60 feet tall. Clue number 3. Sculptor Gutzon Borglum began drilling into the 5,725-foot mountain in 1927. It took 14 years to finish. Can you name this mountain? On the trail, Teddy may have been happiest in the great outdoors. He's shown here with his horse, Manitou. Family ties. Teddy and Edith posed with the children at Sagamore Hill in 1903. From left to right, Quentin, Dad, Theodore Jr., Archie, Alice, Kermit, Mom, and Ethel. The couple lived at Sagamore Hill with Teddy's daughter Alice. Over the years, Edith and Teddy had 5 more children: Theodore, Kermit, Ethel, Archibald, and Quentin. Teddy spent most of his time writing. He had written part of his first book while he was still in college. Throughout his life, he continued to write about history, nature, politics, and his own life. He wrote more than 45 books. He could have been a writer and nothing else. But that was not enough for Teddy. He had too much energy for just one career. He needed much more to do to keep him busy and happy. A new job. Teddy became a police commissioner in New York City. At that time, some of the police in New York were not honest. Some slept on the job instead of keeping the streets safe. Some would take money from criminals. In return, the police promised not to arrest the lawbreakers. Teddy walked through the streets late at night. He caught many police officers breaking the law. He made sure that anyone not doing his job would get in trouble. In his life, Teddy had believed that the problems of the poor were their own fault, but spending time in poor areas of New York City helped change his mind. Now he felt that the poor could not improve their lives if they were not paid fairly for their work. It made Teddy angry to see bosses get rich off the labor of the poor. It was a lesson that he would always remember and try to do something about later in his life. As head of the New York City Police, Teddy made the city a safer place. Chapter 5: Teddy and the Rough Riders. In 1897, Teddy was named Assistant Secretary of the Navy by President William McKinley. At about that time, trouble started brewing in Cuba, a small island in the Atlantic Ocean 90 miles from Florida. In the 1890s, Spain was in control of Cuba. Teddy thought Spain should leave the island. He wanted the U.S. to be the only powerful nation in this part of the world. Most Cubans wanted Spain to leave too. Some Cubans joined together to try to kick Spain out. Teddy was an expert horseback rider. His skills would come in handy. In 1898, Teddy got ready to head for Cuba. There he led the Rough Riders. President McKinley tried to avoid war, but Teddy was eager for it. Why? He thought war would make Americans strong. He probably had another reason, too. Teddy felt bad that his father had not fought in the Civil War. He wanted to make up for that fact and honor his family, and he didn't want to miss out on what he thought would be a great adventure. Remember the Maine. President McKinley sent a battleship, the Maine, to Cuba. Teddy thought it was a bully thing to do. Bully was Teddy's word for excellent. On the night of February 15th, 1898, the Maine exploded. 266 men were killed. No one knew the cause of the explosion, but many blamed Spain. Some newspapers said the U.S. should go to war. They made up stories about the Spanish attack. They knew that war would sell a lot of papers. Experts now believe the explosion was an accident. Spain had nothing to do with it. Teddy was thrilled. He believed Spain had attacked the U.S. Now the U.S. could defend its honor. Teddy formed a volunteer army of 1,000 men. They were nicknamed Roosevelt's Rough Riders. The men fought at a place called San Juan Hill. Many soldiers were seriously wounded and 89 died. Teddy was proud of his men and he was glad the U.S. won the battle. He said it was the great day of my life. Rough Riders proudly posed at the top of San Juan Hill after the battle. The U.S. won the Spanish-American War.